Human life, from the moment of birth, is intertwined with different shades of suffering. We may experience joy for a time, but sooner or later we face loss, illness, loneliness, or separation. Some suffer because love is incomplete, some because their bodies are weakened by illness, some because they lose the dearest ones, and some because they feel utterly alone in a crowded world. Though the forms differ, they all point to the same truth that the Buddha once expressed: life is suffering. At first hearing, this statement sounds like a pessimistic verdict, as though a dark curtain is drawn over human hope. Some may feel disheartened, wondering, if life is only suffering, what reason is there to live? What meaning is there in seeking happiness? Yet the truth is not like that. When the Buddha spoke these 4 words, life is suffering, he was not denying joy, not rejecting happiness, and certainly not sowing despair. Rather, he was opening a vital door, exposing suffering that is often hidden beneath the surface of fleeting pleasures. Suffering is part of existence, like a shadow that cannot be separated from the body under the sun. To realize this is not to sink into sadness, but to awaken. Because only when we dare to face the truth can we find a way forward. If we deny suffering, we live in illusion, clinging to fragile things in the hope of lasting happiness. But illusions will inevitably break, and then our suffering deepens. That is why the Buddha taught that the first step of wisdom is to recognize and accept the truth of suffering. Suffering is not for us to complain about or resent, but to learn how to release our clinging and open the door to transformation. His teaching carries another profound message. Suffering is not a life sentence, but simply a natural part of living. We cannot eliminate it completely, but we can learn to walk through it with peace in our hearts. Just as a sailor knows that storms are part of the ocean, yet instead of blaming the sea, learns how to steer and adjust, and eventually reaches the shore, so too can we experience joy, love, and peace even in the midst of life's imperfections. The Buddha did not urge us to escape reality, but to see it clearly in order to discover liberation. By understanding that suffering will always arise, we no longer feel shocked when it appears, nor do we collapse when life turns against our wishes. Instead, we live with a steady heart and a clear mind, cherishing the fleeting beauty of moments without being broken when they fade. Life is suffering is not a hopeless verdict, but a wake-up call. It is the beginning of a profound journey where one asks, if life is suffering, how then can I rise above it and live peacefully and freely within impermanence? And this very question becomes the doorway to practice, to the realization that true happiness is not beyond reach, but lies in how we face suffering right here and now.
In the Buddha's teaching, the word dukkha is one of the keys to seeing life clearly, yet also one of the most commonly misunderstood. When translated into English as suffering, the term is unintentionally reduced to something extreme and obvious. But dukkha is not just tears, loss, or illness. it is not limited to the darkest moments of life. In truth, dukkha is the underlying imperfection present in every experience, even in the most beautiful ones. It is the fragility we feel in happiness, the unease that arises after achieving what we longed for, the quiet reminder that everything is changing and nothing can be held forever. Bhikkhu Bodhi once said that dukkha reveals the inescapably flawed nature of finite life. This is not a pessimistic statement. It simply reflects a truth. If we fail to see this, we may continue chasing the illusion of perfect happiness in a world that is always in flux. For those who misunderstand dukkha, it may seem like the Buddha only viewed life through the lens of suffering, as though existence were nothing but misery. But in fact, he did not deny joy. He never taught us to avoid happiness. What he pointed out is that even in happiness, dukkha is present, because all emotions, achievements, and relationships are subject to the cycles of arising and passing away. Not seeing this clearly, we often place all our hope in things that cannot endure. We believe love will last forever, that success will complete us, that this body will always be strong. And it is this very expectation that becomes the source of our disappointment. If we look honestly, we will see that dukkha doesn't just arise from great losses. It's present in everyday things. An afternoon eventually fades. A gentle melody comes to an end. A loving gaze, no matter how tender, must one day part from us. These things don't bring immediate pain, but they leave a subtle echo, a sense that something was never fully enough. That is the dissatisfaction the Buddha wanted us to see. And once we do, we begin to let go. We stop demanding life to be perfect. We no longer blame change. Instead, we live with deeper gratitude, knowing that all is fragile. We love more sincerely, knowing no one stays with us forever. We cherish each moment, however small, knowing it will never return the same way. The Buddha didn't introduce dukkha to bring despair, but to guide us to a deeper freedom. When we no longer insist that life must conform to our desires, we begin to live with an open heart. And in that letting go, a new kind of peace arises. A peace no longer dependent on conditions, but rooted in wisdom and acceptance. To understand dukkha correctly is not to surrender to suffering, but to awaken to the ever-changing nature of life. It is not about rejecting joy, but about not placing all our hopes in what cannot stay. And when we do that, we are truly free.
The deeper nature of dukkha doesn't lie only in dark or tragic moments of life. It exists right in the flow of ordinary experience. It is that quiet sense of lack we often feel, even when everything seems to be going well. Look closely. When we finally achieve something we once longed for, a new phone, a promising job, or a sweet relationship, we may feel excitement, a sense of freshness, a widening of the heart. But that feeling doesn't last. In a short time, familiarity dulls the joy. What once thrilled us no longer feels the same. And then our mind begins to crave again. We want something newer, better, more profound. Restlessness returns, silently but persistently. This is the cycle of desire the Buddha pointed out again and again. When we don't understand it, we keep thinking we just need one more thing to feel complete. But the more we get, the more we feel lacking. That sense of not enough isn't in the world, it's in the untamed mind. Driven by the belief that happiness comes from acquiring, we cannot stop. And when we cannot stop, we never feel fulfilled. On the other hand, when we fall into suffering, we often believe the pain will last forever. A deep loss, a hurtful word, or a lonely night can plunge us into darkness. In those moments, the mind tends to despair, projecting a tragic future and convincing us we won't make it through. But in reality, the opposite is often true. Time passes, conditions shift, and the mind begins to change. What once brought pain fades. What once broke us becomes a memory. Both joy and sorrow are impermanent. They come, stay for a while, and go. Yet we tend to believe that pleasant things will last forever, while painful things never end. This misunderstanding creates suffering. When joy arises, we cling to it. When pain appears, we resist it. Both reactions bring unease. By understanding this, we begin to look at life with more awareness. We see that nothing is fixed. All mental states can transform. All emotions, no matter how intense, will change. From this insight, we stop chasing illusions of happiness and stop avoiding sadness. Instead, we remain present. We fully enjoy joy when it comes without grasping. We face sadness when it arises without drowning. Letting go doesn't mean giving up or being indifferent. It is deep acceptance, a clear seeing that life is always changing. And once we see that, we no longer need to struggle against life. We live more gently, more freely, knowing that everything is flowing just as it is. We no longer need to control everything because we've understood that life's nature is unholdable. From that acceptance, a natural peace begins to grow, not from outer conditions, but from inner harmony with reality. This is the gift of understanding dukkha. It does not scare us. On the contrary, it frees us from false expectations. When we no longer demand life to always be joyful or always go our way, we begin to see beauty in the imperfect. A fleeting smile, a passing rain, a hug with no promise, all become precious when we know they won't last. And because they won't last, each present moment becomes sacred.
When we speak of suffering, we often point to external conditions, loss, change, separation. We assume that impermanence itself is the cause of our distress. But if we look more deeply, we'll see that the real issue isn't impermanence, it's our desire for permanence.
The problem is not that things change, but that we don't want them to. As the famous saying goes, impermanence doesn't make us suffer. Wanting things to be permanent when their nature is impermanent is what makes us suffer. All things are in motion. Everything flows. Nothing can remain the same, not even the people or moments we cherish the most. But instead of moving with the flow, we try to hold on to what is fading or grasp at what has already passed. It is that grasping that becomes the root of suffering. The Buddha named this deep cause tanha, the thirst, the craving. It's not just a simple desire, but a powerful inner drive that won't let us rest. It keeps pulling us into the future, urging us to chase after something more, making us believe that happiness lies just one step ahead. But no matter how much we achieve, the mind never feels truly satisfied. The contentment is always temporary, and then tanha rises again. It makes us live like a mouse running endlessly on a wheel, always chasing, always hoping, but never really arriving. This is why suffering doesn't come from events themselves. It comes from the mind's reaction to those events. When someone we love leaves us, we hurt not just from the loss, but because we believed that love would last forever. When an opportunity slips away, we grieve not only because we missed it, but because we thought we could control the outcome. If we had truly understood the impermanent nature of things, we wouldn't suffer as much. Pain lingers only when we resist the natural flow of life. Tanha doesn't always show up in grand ambitions. It can be subtle. It's the irritation when someone doesn't behave as we expect. The frustration when the weather doesn't match our plans. The anxiety when life feels unclear or beyond our control. These are all forms of clinging. And the more we cling, the more we feel small, powerless, and uneasy. Only when we recognize tanha can we begin to transform it. This doesn't mean we must give up all desire. It means we stop letting our desires control the entire landscape of our inner world. We can still dream, we can still strive, but we no longer tie our happiness to external results. We start returning to the present moment, to life as it unfolds right here, right now. And in that moment, when we're no longer grasping, no longer resisting, no longer running, we finally find rest. The mind no longer spins like a wheel. It becomes still, like a calm lake. In that stillness, a deep, unconditional peace begins to emerge. Not because life has stopped changing, but because we have learned how to live with its changes, gently and without attachment.
When people speak of the Buddha's first teaching, they often recall the phrase, "Life is suffering." But in truth, that's only a small part of a much deeper and more expansive message. The Buddha did not stop at acknowledging life's suffering. He didn't say that everything is terrible or that happiness is impossible. What he invited us to do was this: look deeply. Look into the true nature of what's happening.
observe the workings of the mind, the way we react to the world, the way we trap ourselves in craving and fear. Because if we don't see clearly, we will keep chasing illusions of happiness. We believe that if we have enough, money, love, success, health, we'll find peace. But when we achieve these things, satisfaction is brief. Soon we feel lack. We crave again. We are disappointed again. This is the trap the Buddha wants us to wake up from. He didn't teach us to run away from life, nor did he tell us to try to control everything in order to avoid pain. What he showed us was a completely different path, transforming how we relate to life. When our way of seeing changes, the world also changes. When the mind no longer clings, no longer chases, no longer resists, then this very life, with all its ups and downs, becomes the ground for practice, the doorway to freedom. That path does not lie outside of life. It lies right here, in each moment. We don't have to wait for everything to be perfect before we can find peace. Even amid imperfection, we can live fully. Even in situations we don't prefer, we can open our hearts and remain awake. The Buddha didn't ask us to abandon the world, but to live within it with a heart that is not enslaved. Not with indifference, but with great love. Because when we're no longer driven by craving or fear, we are finally free to love, to care, and to be truly present. This is the wisdom the Buddha wished to offer, not to pull us away from life, but to bring us back to it in a deeper, more peaceful, and more awakened way. When we understand this, we no longer mistake the path as withdrawal, as the rejection of emotions, or the denial of the world. On the contrary, we live right in the midst of life, without being swept away. We work, we love, we create, but we are no longer dependent on results to define our worth. And from that space, a deep stillness begins to arise, not from avoidance, but from honest, wholehearted presence with things just as they are.
Imagine a child caring for their mother in her final days. Each meal is a quiet effort to help her swallow spoonfuls of porridge. Each glass of water offered is an act of full presence. Each restless night is filled with worry, exhaustion, and at times helplessness. No one would say this situation is free from suffering. No one can deny the pain of watching a loved one weaken day by day. Yet within the heart of that child, something else is happening. In every act of care, every slow step beside the hospital bed, every silent gaze following the rhythm of the mother's breath, we can feel a quiet current of deep love flowing beneath it all. In such a moment, suffering doesn't disappear, but it takes on a different shape. It's no longer a closed, isolated pain. It becomes a living expression of love. Every crack in the heart is no longer something to avoid, but a door through which compassion enters more deeply. This is when suffering becomes meaningful, not because it feels pleasant, but because it is held within the heart of compassion. And compassion, or karuna in Sanskrit, is one of the vital keys the Buddha offered to meet suffering in a transformative way. Compassion is not soft emotion. It is not pity. Compassion is the ability to stay open in the face of pain, our own and others, without shutting down or turning away. It doesn't make suffering disappear, but it makes it bearable. Within compassion, what once seemed unbearable becomes the ground for connection, for growth, for a quiet, wordless love. That child does not need anyone to witness their sacrifice. They are not hoping for anything in return, because in those acts of care, they are living from the most beautiful part of themselves. They are not avoiding suffering. They are walking straight through it with an open heart. And there, suffering is no longer an obstacle. It becomes the path itself. The Buddha never promised that spiritual practice would remove suffering, but he taught that when we meet suffering with compassion, we no longer fear it. When the heart is wide enough to hold pain, a new kind of strength arises. And this strength doesn't come from control or intellect, but from the capacity to be fully, sincerely, and unconditionally present. This is why compassion is an essential part of the path. It allows us not only to understand suffering, but to walk through it without being consumed. It turns each wound into an opportunity to love more deeply. And in that way, life, even with all its imperfections, can still become a profoundly meaningful journey.
In modern society, especially in the West, many people grow up with a constant question: what is my life's purpose? Or, was I born to do something great? There's often a deep desire to discover a grand mission, a special role that would give life its worth. But in the Buddhist teachings, meaning is not found by chasing after some large destiny. Buddhism does not teach that each person must become a hero or achieve greatness for their life to be meaningful. On the contrary, meaning is found in our full presence with each ordinary moment. We don't have to wait until we achieve something remarkable. We don't have to discover a lofty ideal. Meaning has always been there, hidden in every small action, if we are truly present. When we wash a bowl with mindfulness, when we take a single step in awareness, when we genuinely look into someone's eyes without rushing or judging, what once seemed ordinary becomes sacred. We often think life is only valuable when tied to grand accomplishments, to doing something exceptional. But what the Buddha teaches is this: greatness doesn't lie in the scale of an action, but in the quality of heart we bring to it. A person sweeping leaves with a spirit of letting go, with love and gratitude, is living fully, no different than a king or a scientist. When the mind is fully present, life no longer divides into high or low, important or trivial. A simple touch, a silent gaze, a moment of heartfelt listening, each becomes an act of nourishment and connection. We don't need fame to touch someone's heart. We don't need recognition to make a day meaningful. That's why Buddhism doesn't focus on the question, who am I, in terms of ego, but gently invites us to return to, how am I living this very moment? Every moment is an opportunity to live deeply, to awaken, to love. If we wait until we find some grand mission before we start living meaningfully, we may miss our entire life. But if we return to the small things around us and live fully in them, meaning is already there, quiet, profound, and complete. And this too is a kind of liberation. When we no longer feel pressured to become someone special, we breathe easier. When we see that every moment is precious, we stop chasing the future and begin to truly live. From there, everything we do, even the smallest act, becomes an expression of awareness. Every word becomes a gift. Every gesture becomes a chance to understand and love. And life, though not grand in appearance, becomes a quiet, heartfelt poem.
One of the deep paradoxes the Buddha invites us to see is this: life does not come with a pre-existing meaning waiting to be found. There is no absolute purpose handed to us, no hidden message waiting to be discovered somewhere out there. Life, in its raw and impermanent nature, is empty of fixed meaning. And in that very emptiness lies a profound opportunity, the opportunity for us to create meaning ourselves, not through grand ideas or lofty ambitions, but through mindfulness and an open heart, moment by moment. Meaning is not a destination, it is the way we walk the path. Each time we breathe with awareness, each time we listen to another with full presence, each time we pause and feel life flowing through us, we are weaving a subtle fabric of meaning. As Thich Nhat Hanh beautifully said, the miracle is not to walk on water, but to walk on the green earth, breathing in mindfulness and feeling truly alive. This is not just poetic imagery. It is a powerful reminder that life is always here, and we do not need to become someone else or achieve something special to experience its sacredness. We are conditioned to believe that meaning must be tied to achievements, roles, or some great mission. But the more we search, the more elusive it becomes. The more we try to grasp it, the more it slips away. Because meaning is not out there. It can only be felt when we are fully here. When we let go of the need to be someone or do something great, we begin to live more honestly. And in that honesty, meaning quietly arises, small, silent, but full of life. A full gaze at a flower, a quiet morning with a cup of tea, a moment of self-forgiveness. Each can be sacred if we meet it with an open heart. No need to search far. No need for complicated definitions. Just live deeply in the now. The Buddha did not teach us to become someone special. He taught us how to return to life fully. And when we live in that way, life itself, with all its impermanence, imperfection, and simplicity, becomes a living sutra. No explanation needed, no justification required, just presence and a heart that touches things as they are. Meaning does not need to be found. It simply needs to be created, little by little, through mindfulness, through gratitude, through unconditional love. It is not a journey outward, but a journey home, back to ourselves, back to the breath, back to a life that is humble yet deeply sacred.
So if life is suffering, then what is the point of living? This is not just a philosophical question. It is the silent sigh in many hearts facing loss, pain, meaninglessness, and exhaustion. This question has echoed across generations and is what drives people to seek truth. The Buddha did not offer a rigid answer. Instead, he answered through the way he lived, a path not directed toward a fixed destination, but revealed step by step through mindful presence in the impermanence of life. He did not say we live to eliminate suffering entirely, for suffering is inseparable from existence. Nor did he teach that we live to arrive at some ultimate final state in the distant future. What the Buddha pointed to is a way of living, one in which we awaken in the midst of suffering, love amid loss, and remain present through each fragile breath. When we stop searching for a final answer and begin to live fully with each step, each glance, each unrepeatable moment, then and only then does meaning begin to appear. Meaning is not found in who we will become, what we will achieve, or how we will be remembered. It is not at the final destination. It lives in the way we walk the path. If we walk with presence, with gratitude, with deep sensitivity, then each step, whether through mud or soft grass, can become a living sutra. And within that fragility, life becomes precious. Because everything changes, every moment becomes a chance to love, to understand, to let go. We may not choose our circumstances, but we can choose how to meet them. We may not control all that will come, but we can learn to show up with steadiness and an open heart. The Buddha offered no promise of perfect safety. He gave no roadmap to paradise. He simply extended a hand and invited us to return to this moment. Right here, when we stop running, stop striving, stop clinging, we begin to truly live. So if there is a final answer, it is not an idea, it is a way of being. We do not live to arrive somewhere, but to walk with as much mindfulness, compassion, and honesty as we can offer to each passing moment.
We were not born just to suffer. Though life is full of imperfections, uncertainty, and loss, our presence here is not a punishment. We are here to learn how to face suffering with awakened eyes and an open heart. We are not here to run from pain or chase fleeting pleasures. We are here to understand suffering, to live through it deeply, and from that place of knowing, to walk a path of wisdom and compassion. The Buddha did not teach that life is meaningless or only full of suffering. He taught that in suffering, if we look deeply, transformation and freedom can arise. Suffering is not a dead end. It is a doorway to seeing more clearly life and ourselves. And what the Buddha pointed to was not a rigid doctrine, but a living path,
not a life lived to escape suffering, nor one spent waiting for a final ideal state. It's a life lived fully in each moment, pleasant or painful, with a present heart, without fleeing, without rushing. That presence doesn't come from theory, but from experience. When we sit with our sadness without judging it, when we look at someone's pain without turning away, when we stay with an uncomfortable feeling instead of pushing it away, meaning quietly begins to reveal itself. The meaning of life, as the Buddha taught, is not something we have to go out and find. It's not hidden in a lofty mission or special destiny. On the contrary, meaning is created through how we live each day. When we wash a bowl with care, walk with gratitude, speak a kind word from a place of stillness, we are living meaning. We don't need to become a great figure or achieve greatness. We just need to be fully present. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "The miracle is not to walk on water, but to walk on the green earth, breathing in mindfulness and feeling truly alive." This statement captures the spirit of the Dharma. Life doesn't need to be dressed up in grand illusions. Life itself is already miraculous if we know how to pause and be here. What makes life feel meaningless is not suffering itself, but our absence. When we are not truly living, lost in past regrets, future plans, worries, or dreams, we lose the life that is unfolding now. And in losing the present, we lose the sacredness of life itself. If there is a final answer, it's not a lofty idea. It lies in how we live each day. When we realize that there's nowhere to arrive, no ideal state to achieve, we stop striving, stop running, and in that stillness, we begin to truly live. We live not to reach a destination, but to be fully present for the journey itself, with all its roughness, its shadows, its slow unfolding, and its deep lessons. Ultimately, meaning is not something to be found, but something to be lived. Each time we open our heart, even just a little, each time we listen to ourselves without judgment, each time we greet an ordinary day with fresh eyes, we are creating meaning. We don't need anyone's approval. We don't need grand results. Meaning isn't in the destination. It's in every mindful, compassionate, gentle step we take upon this impermanent earth.